d4, knight f6, c4, d6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f3, short castle, bishop e3, c5. We examined in the previous chapter the possibilities after dc5. Now let's see what happens first if he goes d5. I would say immediately that this is not the best reaction here, since black can attack immediately the center with e6. If white wants to take on e6, the best is fast development with bishop e6, queen d2, and knight c6, ignoring the importance of the pawn on d6, because after long castle knight d7 already black is taking control of very important squares in the center, black squares, and it's overtaking the initiative. So since d6 is not that dangerous for black, white can try here queen d2. In this case, we already saw a similar situation. We just take e d5, c d5. And what is important now to remember, it's our setup. a6, important to prevent this plans with long castle, because after a6, a4 already, of course, b5 will come after long castle. So rook e8, pressure in the center. Let's say he goes bishop d3 or bishop b2. Actually, the problem now is that he cannot put this bishop, this knight, to develop it to h3. And if the bishop goes to d3, then knight d7, knight e5 is coming. So maybe the most logical move here would be knight ge2. Then we would go knight bd7. On knight f4, the typical square for our knight is to stay on e5, because since there is no f4, so that's a very comfortable situation for knight on e5. More than that, sometimes he cannot go back because of knight c4. So this is really a good follower of the knight on f4. So for example, bishop e2, we immediately can use the fact that there is no good move for knight, play g5, spoil the pawn structure after knight h3, bh3, gh3, and h6. After long castle, knight g6, we control fully the squares, and advantage for black. That's why knight on f4 it's less welcome for white, so they better prefer to put the knight to g3. In this case, you remember from previous lines, against this knight on g3 we have an excellent play with h5. So we play h5, bishop e2, h4, knight f1, and same like in the previous examples, the plan with knight h7 is good enough. But before playing bishop f2, before playing f5, we can bring the knight to e5, and only after, if he would go here h3, of course we will play f5, but if he goes knight e3, then it's very funny for myself. It was a little bit of revelation, this tactical motive. It's not often you see it. It's h3, g3, and here the move knight g5. Pardon. h3, g3, and knight g5. This is really strong, because how to defend this? I mean, everything is hanging now, and of course queen d1, it's already, I think some tactical ideas already can start working after f5. Or even better, yes. So instead of this g3, there was one game in correspondence. White allowed to play to spoil the structure after for h2, but in this case, of course, the structure is spoiled. The king is in the center. A nice move c4 followed by knight c5. Black overtook the initiative. So that's all about your list 7d5. In this chapter we can also check the other type of sidelines for white. The main line, of course, is knight Nge2. So after knight G2, we go knight C6. Now if they will take on C5, they will transpose to the positions we examined in the chapter with DC5 immediately. He can try to keep the tension here with queen D2. This is the sideline I mentioned before, because the main line, of course, is D5. In this case, we place our queen to A5. First of all, we protect the pawn on C5, but second, we have some pressure on the queen side and also some pin on this diagonal. On long castle, immediately we start preparing B5 with A6, king B1, and the easiest way to equalize with black is to play E5. So here we kind of make symmetrical structure, because after DC5, knight D5, we take out D2, rook D2 and play knight D4. I would say that I would prefer even black in this position, because our bishop is slightly better than his bishop. But normally, of course, it's equal. So that's about long castle, and please remember this idea in the situation when they don't play D5, don't take on C5. One of the main idea for black is in this situation to play at some stage E5 with the idea knight D4. After queen A5, also he can try other moves. Like one of the main can be here D5. On D5 we play knight E5, let's say knight G3, and immediately we use the fact that queen is already on A5, so we attack on B4. Of course, if he is weakening this diagonal, then we have a typical trick. First we jump with the first knight to G4, and then we jump with the second in order to take on C3. So this is typical attack. Like it's similar like in Dragon and many openings in which the bishop gets to G7. Instead of getting into this trap, of course, instead of B3, he can try to exchange the queens, but here the exchange of the queens is in our favor. We just take on D2, play A6, first play H5, H4, and B5. Here we have an excellent Benko type of position. Actually, if it's funny enough, but in Benko, one of the most important things is that for black, it's with pawn down, it's easier to play in the endgames even than with queens on the board, because then the initiative can be even stronger, because this queen usually protects on c2 somehow the queen side, and without queens it's even sometimes more difficult. For example, this is the good example of having problems for white in this Benko. So bishop d7 now want to connect the rooks, to bring the rook to b8. Simply in the endgame it's difficult to hold this the pressure. So I mean everything is really very strong. Sometimes always keep in mind this pusher, this kicker h3 in order to attack some weaknesses. So that's all about knight g3. What he can also try to put, as we say, the knight to c1, which makes sense because in this case he might attack with tempo the queen, and also he is preparing the development. But on knight c1 we will continue the same, a6, The idea is typical, bank of b5. No problem for us if he tries to attack the knight, and we have just enough time to play knight g4, bishop g1, b5, because now we are threatening b4 and knight e4, so he has no time to play h3 here. Yes, f4. If f4 is not a problem, then knight on e5, of course, it's very strong. He can try here bishop e2, but then, as we said, b5 it's interesting, but maybe here exactly no need to sacrifice. We can play bishop d7 and b5. I mean, I think all these ideas, they work well for black. Yeah, that's more or less all about the setup with queen d2. I mean, we will not spend too much time on, because the other line with d5 is much more important. So let's check what's going on after queen d2, queen a5, and after 7 knight c6 and d5. In this case, we go knight e5, knight g3, and h5. This is very important to remember, because there are many ways for black to play, but this is the most exact move order. What is the idea behind we are talking in this DVD about modern approach. So this is exactly the modern approach, the modern ideas. To attack as fast as possible this knight on g3 and to make as most uncomfortable the white's play and his development of the pieces. So bishop e2 is the most natural move. Otherwise, the knight will have to go back, which is not welcome, and after h3 we will spoil his structure. So bishop e2 is a must. h4, knight f1. This is number one. We have to remember this position. For example, still he cannot castle next move. So from this point of view, you have to be fast with e6. So if he will, simply play here knight d2, just normal move, yeah. Then after ed, cd, we have an excellent move, h3. And on g3, we will use these weaknesses later. I mean, this pawn on h3 is very strong, which is just transposed to the normal lines a6, a4, bishop d7. Of course, the idea of b5 is in the air. And it's next move coming with b5. What I want to add and to remind you about the whole position is that, remember we talked about this knight e5 and square g4. So the moment they play f4, we still keep in mind always this knight square g4. So we have it here, so that allows us, comparing with the other lines in Zemlya, where white has the pawn on h3, and they always push us after f4 to jump to c4 somewhere to get some ugly structures with bishop c4, bc4, and some forced lines over there. In this case, we keep our knight safe on e5, and of course he doesn't want to push it to g4. So that allows us to play very comfortably with b5. You can check the games in database, but it's already, I think, the general picture after b5 is quite clear. From this point of view, for us, much more interesting and much more dangerous for black is to examine this move f4 here. And this is the main move. In this case, I want to come with a recommendation. There was this game of Tomaszewski's with knight g4, bishop g4, knight g4, queen g4, ed4, ed5, and later with d4. And black had two bishops against two knights with the square d5 for white. But strategically, it is very suspicious for black. So I would suggest here this piece sacrifice, which already was played, of course. And I think the most memorable game was played by Kurnosov against Perligras in 2013 in this line. This is the sacrifice knight c4. And I think it's the right moment to give the piece, because you see the king stacks in the center. And we start the fourth game in which we open all files, all possible files and diagonals. look, bishop takes c4, of course it's a must. And here we are coming with the second extremely strong move, b5. What does it bring to us? It brings to us, first of all, the b file, and second, the tempos, because tempos in this game are very important. Taking with the knight in this situation would allow us to take on d5, e d5, rook e8, so he cannot move his knight, he cannot move his king. He's in a real deep trouble. h3, knight e4, bringing more pieces into the play. Bishop d3, bishop b2. The position is crazy, but I believe in black's power of attack here. 15, knight d6 he might try here. It's like counter-sacrifice or whatever you call it. In this case, we take the bishop, and he's trying to secure himself with some move like e5. But after bishop e6, which creates the threat of knight d5, he has to take on f6, queen f6. Suddenly we see that everything is hanging. Rook d8, queen b2, c3, whatever. I mean, really, it's difficult to hold this position. I mean, I think it's impossible if you're on computer, but even for computers. So, from this point of view, we can examine here after b5, also the move bishop takes b5, which is the main line that was played in the mentioned game of Kurnosov. And e d5. This is the point. Now, wants he or not, he has to open the e file. For example, after e d5, first we bring one rook on the file, on the open file. After bishop, because if he go away, we will take on b2, and then on g2 we'll be hanging, and the rook will come to e8. I mean, this will be not holdable position. So he's trying to postpone this for a while. After rook b8, he can try here bishop d2. This was the game. Bishop g4, tempo, queen a4, a6, another nice tempo sacrifice, queen a6, and now when the queen is away from this, his king, we can play h3, gh3, bishop f3, rook g1, knight d5. This was everything played by Kurnosov against Perdigras, and with clear attack for white. Even piece down, but for sure with this king in the center, we have all these checks on the e file, on h4. I mean, king might be easily be mated simply. I would recommend white here if they want something to analyze this e5 move, but I feel all the way comfortable. Even sometimes maybe not necessarily to remember exactly the lines for black, just the spirit of the attack. If you will have a little bit practice here in this type of position, then you will do fine. For example, here on e5, very typical intermediate move, bishop g4, bishop e2, less convincing is ef6, because this typical sacrifice which happened, I think, in Swidler's game with Grishuk, if I remember correctly. After ef6, bishop, but I think it was similar position, not exactly the same. fg7, king g7, rook d1, d4, rook d4, c d4, bishop d4, f6, knight e3. So what we have here? We have the situation where he has 4 pieces for queen and rook. Very even imagination difficult to say it and to imagine and to evaluate this. But I think finally, what is the power of the rooks? We can always give one rook for something in the convenient moment. So let's see how we settle up our pieces in this nice position. Of course, after knight e3, first we take the file, rook b8. So if the bishop moves, then we take on b2. Short castle, already we create a first attack by queen a5. Queen b4, more pressure. yeah, on queen a5, bishop d3, queen b4, bishop c4, queen b2. Okay, it's about that if he doesn't have pawns with these pieces, for him it's difficult to fight against this rook and queen. And I would even suggest that this is better for black. After bishop g4, bishop e2 should be the main move. Then we take on e2. Even with exchange white color bishop, knight e2, d5, fe5, and knight d7, queen d5, knight e5, queen d8, rook a d8, knight f4, rook e8. Now thanks to these factors that king stacks in the center and everything is attacked, I would say that black has a full compensation, because difficult to defend against the threats like knight c4, knight g4, and so on. On 17 move, he can also try to take here with the queen. In this case, we will take. Knight d5, knight e5. Rook d1, rook e8. King f2, c4, keeping in mind this idea of knight d3. I mean, again, this king is bad, so you have full compensation. Let's have some conclusion on this. Let's call it the main line of Zemish. We avoided all those as type of positions which I mentioned, with knight e5, f4, knight c4, bc4, with long variations which I gave in my previous book and were reflected by many authors. This one, I think it's not part of the official theory yet, this line, but for sure should be, because the sacrifices is very, beside the fact that it's romantic, it's nice, it's also mathematically strong. And I mean, it's from practical point of view, it's much easier to play with black than with white. The ideas are all shown. It's to, after knight c4, to go very fast with b5, e d5, rook b8, rook e8, h3. I mean, all these active moves are really helping to destroy white's position. And sometimes it's enough just to keep this spirit of attack, and it will come by itself, the move, the necessary move, because of course white has different reactions, but in all of them we are quite happy with what we have.